Switzerland, the land of stunning mountains, sparkling lakes, and delicious chocolate, has a history that goes way, way back. Long before fondue and cuckoo clocks, imagine Switzerland tens of thousands of years ago during the Ice Age. The entire region was covered in massive glaciers, carving out the dramatic landscapes we see today. The Alps, the Jura Mountains, and the rolling Swiss plateau. As the glaciers slowly melted, the land became habitable and the first humans arrived. Archaeologists have found evidence of early human activity in Switzerland dating back to 150,000 years ago. These were Neanderthals, our ancient cousins, who roamed the area hunting animals and gathering food. By the Stone Age, around 10,000 years ago, modern humans had settled in the region, living in caves and using simple tools made of stone. Around 5,000 years ago, something big happened: the Neolithic Revolution. People in Switzerland started farming. They grew crops like wheat and barley and raised animals like cows, sheep, and goats. This was a huge shift from hunting and gathering, and it allowed communities to settle in one place. One of the coolest discoveries from this time is the pile-dwelling settlements built near lakes. These were houses on stilts, constructed over the water to protect against wild animals and enemies. Archaeologists have found these ancient villages in places like Lake Zurich and Lake Geneva, complete with tools, pottery, and even food remains. These lake dwellers were some of Switzerland's first engineers, and their villages are now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Fast forward to the Bronze Age, around 2,200 to 800 years ago, and things got even more interesting. People in Switzerland discovered how to make bronze, a mix of copper and tin. This new material was used to create tools, weapons, and jewelry, making life easier and more sophisticated. Switzerland's central location in Europe made it a hub for trade. People exchanged goods like amber, salt, and metals with neighboring regions. The Swiss plateau became a bustling network of trade routes, connecting the Mediterranean to northern Europe. This era also saw the rise of hill forts, fortified settlements built on high ground for protection. By the Iron Age, 800 to 50 years ago, Switzerland was home to the Celts, a group of tribes known for their bravery, artistry, and love of storytelling. The most famous Celtic tribe in Switzerland was the Helvetii, who lived on the Swiss plateau. They were skilled farmers, warriors, and metalworkers, creating intricate jewelry and weapons. The Helveti's were also ambitious. In 58 years AC, they decided to pack up and migrate westward, hoping to find new lands. But their plans were foiled by none other than Julius Caesar, the famous Roman general. Caesar saw the Helveti's migration as a threat and confronted them at the Battle of Bibracte. Despite their fierce fighting, the Helvetii were defeated, and Caesar brought Switzerland under Roman control. With the Romans in charge, Switzerland entered a new era of prosperity. The Romans were master builders, and they transformed the region with roads, bridges, and cities. Some of the most important Roman settlements in Switzerland included Aventicum, Avenches, the capital of Roman Switzerland, complete with a grand amphitheater, temples, and baths. Augusta Raurica, near Basel, a bustling trade center with a theater and a forum. And Colonia Julia Equestris, Nyon, a thriving town on the shores of Lake Geneva. The Romans also brought their language, Latin, which would later evolve into the Romansh language still spoken in parts of Switzerland today. Roman rule brought stability and innovation to the region, but it wasn't meant to last forever. After the fall of the Roman Empire in the 5th century, Switzerland entered a new chapter in its history, the Middle Ages. This was a time of knights, castles, and powerful rulers, but it was also a time of uncertainty and constant change. The once unified Roman territory was now divided among various Germanic tribes. Let's explore how dukes, bishops, and evolving borders shaped this era. As the Roman Empire crumbled, Germanic tribes moved into Switzerland. The two most important groups were the Alemanni, and the Burgundians. The Alemanni settled in the eastern and central parts of Switzerland, while the Burgundians took over the west. These tribes brought their own languages, customs, and ways of life. Over time, the Alemanni's language evolved into what we now know as Swiss German, while the Burgundians' influence laid the foundation for the French-speaking regions of Switzerland. This linguistic divide still exists today and is one of the defining features of Swiss culture. By the 6th century, the Franks, another Germanic tribe, rose to power under the leadership of King Clovis I. The Franks conquered both the Alemanni and the Burgundians, bringing Switzerland under the rule of the Frankish Empire. This marked the beginning of the Merovingian dynasty, a period of relative stability and Christianization. Monasteries and churches were built across the region, and Christianity began to take root. The most famous of these early Christian centers was the Abbey of Saint-Gallen, founded in the 7th century. This monastery became a major hub of learning and culture, preserving ancient texts and promoting education during the Middle Ages. In the 8th century, the Frankish Empire reached its peak under Charlemagne, also known as Charles the Great. Charlemagne was a towering figure in European history, and his reign had a profound impact on Switzerland. He expanded the Frankish Empire, reformed the legal system, and promoted Christianity. Under Charlemagne, Switzerland became part of a vast empire that stretched from modern-day France to Germany and Italy. However, after Charlemagne's death in 814 DC, his empire was divided among his grandsons in the Treaty of Verdun, 843 DC. Switzerland was split between the Kingdom of East Francia, later the Holy Roman Empire, and the Kingdom of West Francia in modern-day France. This division set the stage for centuries of political fragmentation and power struggles. During the 10th and 11th century, Switzerland was part of the Holy Roman Empire, a loose confederation of territories in Central Europe. The Holy Roman Emperor was the nominal ruler, but real power often lay in the hands of local nobles, dukes, and bishops. One of the most powerful families in Switzerland during this time was the House of Zähringen. The Zähringens were dukes who ruled over much of what is now western Switzerland, including the cities of Bern and Fribourg. They built castles, founded cities, and promoted trade, leaving a lasting legacy in the region. Another important figure during this period was the Bishop of Basel. The bishops were not just religious leaders, they were also powerful political figures who controlled large territories. The Bishopric of Basel, established in the 4th century, became one of the most influential institutions in medieval Switzerland. The bishops ruled over lands in the northwest, including the city of Basel, and played a key role in the region's politics and economy. Meanwhile, in the south, the Alpine passes became increasingly important. These mountain routes, such as the Gotthard Pass, connected northern and southern Europe, making Switzerland a vital crossroads for trade and travel. Control over these passes was highly sought after, and local nobles often fought for dominance. The House of Savoy, a powerful dynasty based in modern-day Italy, extended its influence into southern Switzerland, controlling key territories like the Canton of Valais. The story of the Swiss Confederation begins in the 13th century, a time when Europe was dominated by kings, knights, and feudal lords. In the heart of the Alps, however, something extraordinary was happening. The people of 3 small valleys, Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden, were about to make history. Their struggle for freedom and unity would lay the foundation for modern Switzerland. Let's explore how it all began. In the early 13th century, the region that is now Switzerland was part of the Holy Roman Empire, a vast and loosely organized collection of territories. While the emperor ruled in name, real power was in the hands of local nobles, bishops, and abbots. The people living in the Alpine valleys, however, had a different way of life. They were farmers, herders, and traders who valued their independence and self-governance. They didn't like being told what to do by distant rulers, and they were willing to fight for their freedom. The spark that ignited the Swiss Confederation came in 1291 DC. On August 1st of that year, representatives from Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden met on the Rütli Meadow, a quiet and picturesque spot overlooking Lake Lucerne. There, they signed a document known as the Federal Charter, or Letter of Alliance. This agreement was a promise to support each other against any outside threats, particularly the Habsburgs, a powerful noble family that was trying to expand its control over the region. The charter was written in Latin and sealed with the signatures of the leaders of the three valleys. While the original document no longer exists, its spirit lives on as the foundation of Swiss independence. The Habsburgs were not happy about this alliance. They saw the three valleys as part of their territory and were determined to bring them under control. In 1315 DC, the Habsburg army marched into Switzerland to crush the rebellion. The Swiss, however, were ready. At the Battle of Morgarten, a small force of Swiss farmers and herders used their knowledge of the terrain to ambush the Habsburg army. Armed with pikes, halberds, and a fierce determination to defend their freedom, the Swiss defeated the much larger and better equipped Habsburg forces. This victory was a turning point. It proved that the Swiss could stand up to powerful enemies and inspired other regions to join their cause. Over the next few decades, the Swiss Confederation grew. In 1332, the city of Lucerne joined the alliance. Lucerne was an important trading hub, and its addition brought wealth and resources to the Confederation. In 1351, the city of Zurich joined, followed by Glarus and Zug in 1352, and Bern in 1353. Each new member brought its own strengths and resources, making the Confederation stronger and more diverse. By the mid-14th century, the Swiss Confederation was a formidable force in the region. The Swiss were not just fighting for their own freedom, they were also fighting for a new way of life. Unlike the feudal systems of Europe, where power was concentrated in the hands of a few nobles, the Swiss Confederation was based on the idea of self-governance. Each member of the Confederation had a say in how things were run, and decisions were made through councils and assemblies. This system of direct democracy was revolutionary for its time and remains a defining feature of Swiss politics today. The Swiss also developed a unique military system. Instead of relying on knights and professional soldiers, they trained ordinary citizens to fight. Every able-bodied man was required to serve in the militia, and they practiced regularly to stay ready for battle. The Swiss became known for their skill with the pike, a long spear that was highly effective in close combat. Their disciplined formations and innovative tactics made them one of the most feared fighting forces in Europe. By the late 14th century, the Swiss Confederation had become a major power in the region. The Habsburgs tried several times to regain control, but each attempt ended in failure. At the Battle of Sempach in 1386, the Swiss defeated the Habsburgs once again, securing their independence. This victory was celebrated in Swiss folklore, particularly the story of Arnold von Winkelried, a legendary hero who is said to have sacrificed himself to break the enemy lines. The Swiss Confederation continued to grow and evolve over the next century. In 1481, the cities of Fribourg and Solothurn joined the alliance, followed by Basel and Schaffhausen in 1501. Each new member brought its own culture, language, and traditions, adding to the rich tapestry of Swiss society. By the late 18th century, the Swiss Confederation was a loose alliance of 13 cantons, each with its own government and traditions. While the cantons were united by a shared commitment to independence, they were also divided by differences in language, religion, and politics. The Protestant cantons, like Zurich and Bern, often clashed with the Catholic cantons, like Lucerne and Fribourg. These divisions made it difficult for the Confederation to respond to external threats, and by the 1790s, a new threat was looming: the French Revolution. The French Revolution, which began in 1789, sent shockwaves across Europe. The revolutionaries' ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity inspired many people, but they also terrified the ruling elites. In Switzerland, the revolution sparked a wave of unrest. In 1798, inspired by the French example, revolutionaries in the canton of Vaud rose up against their rulers in Bern. The French, eager to spread their revolutionary ideals, saw an opportunity to intervene. In March 1798, French troops marched into Switzerland, and the old Swiss Confederation collapsed. The French imposed a new government known as the Helvetic Republic. This was a centralized state modeled after the French Republic, and it aimed to modernize Switzerland by abolishing the old feudal system and creating a more unified and egalitarian society. However, the Helvetic Republic was deeply unpopular. The Swiss, who valued their local traditions and autonomy, resented the French interference. The new government was also plagued by corruption and inefficiency, and it struggled to maintain control. The Helvetic Republic faced opposition from all sides. The old elites, who had lost their power, fought to restore the old order. At the same time, peasant uprisings broke out in several cantons, as ordinary people resisted the new taxes and conscription laws imposed by the French. The situation was chaotic, and Switzerland descended into civil war. In 1703, Napoleon Bonaparte, who had risen to power in France, decided to intervene. He recognized that the Helvetic Republic was unsustainable, and he sought a compromise that would restore stability while keeping Switzerland under French influence. Napoleon summoned Swiss representatives to Paris and imposed a new constitution, known as the Act of Mediation. This document restored some of the canton's autonomy while maintaining a centralized government. It also created 6 new cantons, bringing the total to 19. The Act of Mediation was a turning point. It ended the Civil War and brought a measure of stability to Switzerland. However, it also made Switzerland a client state of France, dependent on Napoleon's goodwill. During the Napoleonic Wars, Switzerland was forced to provide troops and resources to the French army. Many Swiss soldiers fought in Napoleon's campaigns, including the disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812 DC. Napoleon's fortunes began to decline after his defeat at the Battle of Leipzig in 1813 DC. As the French Empire crumbled, Switzerland found itself caught in the middle of the great powers' struggle for dominance. In December 1813, DC, Swiss leaders declared the Act of Mediation null and void and began negotiating a new constitution. However, the cantons were deeply divided over the future of the Confederation. Some wanted to restore the old order, while others sought a more centralized government. The situation was further complicated by the Congress of Vienna, a meeting of European powers held in 1814 to 1815 to redraw the map of Europe after Napoleon's defeat. The Swiss delegation, led by Charles Pictet de Rochemont, worked tirelessly to secure Switzerland's independence and neutrality. Their efforts paid off. In March 1815, the Congress of Vienna recognized Switzerland as a neutral state and guaranteed its independence. This was a major achievement, and it laid the foundation for Switzerland's modern foreign policy. In August 1815, the Swiss cantons signed a new constitution, known as the Federal Pact. This document restored the cantons' autonomy while creating a loose confederation with a weak central government. The Federal Pact was a compromise, and it reflected the deep divisions within Swiss society. However, it also marked the beginning of a new era. For the first time, all the cantons, now numbering 22, were united under a single constitution. In the 20th century, when the First World War broke out in 1914, Switzerland was immediately put to the test. The war pitted the Central Powers, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and their allies, against the Allied powers, France, Britain, Russia, and later, the United States. Switzerland was surrounded by warring nations, Germany to the north, Austria, Hungary to the east, France to the west, and Italy to the south. Despite this, Switzerland declared its neutrality and mobilized its army to defend its borders. The Swiss military, under the command of General Ulrich Wille, was tasked with protecting the country's sovereignty. The army was mobilized quickly, and fortifications were built along the borders. However, maintaining neutrality was not just a military challenge, it was also a diplomatic and economic one. Switzerland had to navigate complex relationships with both sides of the conflict, ensuring that it did not favor one over the other. This was particularly difficult because Switzerland's population was divided along linguistic and cultural lines. The German-speaking Swiss tended to sympathize with the Central Powers, while the French-speaking Swiss leaned toward the Allies. This internal division made it even more important for the government to maintain a strict policy of neutrality. Economically, Switzerland faced significant challenges during the war. The country relied heavily on imports for food and raw materials, and the war disrupted trade routes. To make matters worse, both the Allies and the Central Powers imposed blockades, making it difficult for Switzerland to obtain essential goods. The Swiss government responded by rationing food and fuel and by increasing domestic production. Despite these measures, the war caused widespread hardship, and by 1918, many Swiss were struggling to make ends meet. The end of the First World War in 1918 brought relief, but it also brought new challenges. The war had left Europe in turmoil, and the rise of new political ideologies, such as communism and fascism, threatened to destabilize the continent. In Switzerland, the post-war period was marked by social unrest and labor strikes. As workers demanded better wages and working conditions, the government responded with reforms, but the underlying tensions remained. When the Second World War broke out in 1939, Switzerland once again found itself surrounded by conflict. This time, the stakes were even higher. Nazi Germany had already demonstrated its willingness to invade neutral countries, as it had done with Belgium and the Netherlands. Switzerland, with its strategic location and valuable resources, was a potential target. The Swiss government, under the leadership of Federal Councillor Henri Guizot, was determined to defend the country's neutrality and independence. General Guizot, who was appointed commander-in-chief of the Swiss Army in 1939, implemented a strategy known as the National Redoubt. This plan involved withdrawing Swiss forces to the mountainous regions of the Alps, where they could hold out against an invasion. The idea was to make any attack on Switzerland so costly that it would deter potential aggressors. The Swiss also fortified their borders with bunkers, artillery positions, and obstacles, creating a formidable defensive line. Throughout the war, Switzerland maintained its neutrality. Switzerland traded with both sides, providing goods like machinery, watches, and precision instruments. This trade was essential for the Swiss economy, but it also raised ethical questions, particularly when it came to dealings with Nazi Germany. One of the most controversial aspects of Switzerland's wartime policy was its treatment of refugees. While Switzerland provided asylum to thousands of people fleeing persecution, including Jews, it also turned away many refugees, particularly in the later years of the war. This policy has been the subject of much debate and criticism, and it remains a dark chapter in Swiss history. Despite these challenges, Switzerland managed to avoid invasion and occupation during the Second World War. The country's military preparedness, combined with its diplomatic efforts, helped to deter potential aggressors. At the same time, Switzerland played a humanitarian role, serving as a neutral intermediary and providing aid to prisoners of war and civilians affected by the conflict. The end of the Second World War in 1945 marked the beginning of a new era for Switzerland. The country emerged from the war with its independence and neutrality intact, but it also faced new challenges in a rapidly changing world. Switzerland's post-war success was built on a combination of factors, including its neutrality, political stability, and highly skilled workforce. Unlike many European countries, Switzerland had avoided the physical destruction of war, allowing it to focus on rebuilding and modernizing its economy. At the same time, the country's long tradition of innovation and precision engineering positioned it to take advantage of the growing global demand for high-quality goods and services.